Hello, I'm John, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to install a new SoundTraxx 21-pin Blunami decoder into an Athearn SW1500 HO scale locomotive. The scope of this project consists of taking the shell off the chassis, installing the Blunami decoder, soldering the speaker wires and sticking the speaker into the shell, programming the decoder right on the Blunami app, and then running it on a layout. Now this is a plug-and-play install and will require some minor soldering as well as some basic modeling tools. You can find a list of products I'm using in the description of the video. These are affiliate links, which means Amazon will provide a small commission to me if you buy them using the link. To be clear, the price is the same to you. You're just telling Amazon that you want them to share the proceeds from the sale with me. I want to thank Athearn for providing the model and SoundTraxx for providing the decoder and speaker for this video. Now let's head over to the workbench and get started. Alright, so here are some of the things that I'll be using. I have a screwdriver to take the model apart. There's a little micro brush that I'm going to be using to apply alcohol to it to clean up the soldered joint areas where the soldering is going to take place. I have little tweezers to grab small stuff like wires and tiny screws. I have wire strippers. There's a soldering iron, Kapton tape, painter's tape, and then above all that stuff on the picture, we have flux and solder, as well as a foam cradle to put the model in. When I have to turn it upside down to take the couplers off, you'll see that in a minute. And then I don't know about you, but even for HO scale, I'm having to use the magnifying visor these days. We have an Athearn SW1500 painted in the Western Pacific paint scheme and numbered for number 1501. This is a Blunami brand new 21-pin digital sound decoder. This is the part number 885623, which is EMD2. That's a sound set that they have loaded on here. And then this is the speaker. The part number for this is 810154. And this is called a mini cube oval speaker and baffle. So it comes with the speaker and the enclosure. All right, so I'm going to put the model very carefully into the cradle. And by the way, you can buy these kind of cradles if you want to. I made this simply by cutting a piece of foam that I already had. So if you're really budget-minded, that's not a bad tip to consider. But anyway, there's a screw over here, and there's a screw over here, and the screws hold the couplers in place. And once we do that, the shell can simply be lifted off the frame of the model. And you have to be careful because there are wires there, and you don't want to pull all those wires out if you can help it. But this is what we're looking at, and let me explain for a second. This is what's called a dummy plug, and what you have to do is take this off very carefully and then simply replace it with the new decoder. Here's our 21-pin receptacle. Here's our 21-pin decoder. If you look at the receptacle, you'll notice there's a pin missing down here. If you look at the decoder, you'll notice there's a slot missing right here. That's to let you know the correct orientation to put this on the receptacle. So it has to go down on top of the receptacle like so. And it won't be able to push down any further once it's where it needs to be. So that should do it. Now, the only other thing we have to do to complete this process is hook up the speaker. Okay, so I put the shell on the other side of the chassis now just so I can show you this. If you look up in here, it looks like there's plenty of space for a speaker here. And in the factory installed sound and DCC models of this particular model, it comes with a little, I don't know, bracket, I guess, that connects here. And then the speaker sits in that bracket. It's like a bracket with an enclosure. Well, I don't have that bracket, so I may just put a piece of styrene here, or what I'm thinking of doing is putting the speaker in the shell and just attaching it to the top of the inside of the hood here, just with some double-sided foam tape. That will work. And then the other thing I have to point out is that the terminals on the speaker are here, and they go to these terminals on the board that are marked S positive and S negative. And because we're only going to use this one speaker, we don't have to worry about the polarity. If you're using more than one speaker, it becomes important which wires go to which terminal on which speaker and so forth. So that's the next part. I'm going to wire the speaker, and then we're going to test this on the test track. So before I solder the speaker, I want to show you something. Speakers are magnetic, and if you haven't done this before, you don't want to be trying to solder when you learn this. I have my soldering iron. It's not heated yet, and I just want to show you what happens if you don't secure the speaker when you go to solder. It's going to stick to your soldering iron. So you'll be sitting here with your solder trying to get the soldering done, and it's going to grab it. The soldering iron will grab the speaker or vice versa. So to help deal with that, I'm just going to tape the speaker down with some of this wonderful blue tape. Everybody seems to have this stuff these days. I'm going to tape it down on my surface, and that will hold it in place while I'm trying to solder the wires to these contacts. Now, the next thing you want to do is make sure that these contacts are clean, because if your contacts are not clean, the wire will not stick to them. So I just have some alcohol on this micro brush here, and I'm just making sure that these contacts are clean. I think that should do. Since I have my alcohol on the micro brush, I'm going to clean the contacts off on the board as well. And again, this is one of those things that sometimes people forget to do this, or they just don't think to do this. I've always found that my soldering is a lot better if I'm working with really clean surfaces. This is one of the things I kind of forgot about in the beginning. This is 36 gauge stranded wire, and I'm just going to strip the ends. And I've cut lengths that I know are longer than what I need, because what I'm thinking is I can just, if I need to, I can shorten them. It's better to have more than you need than to find out that you didn't cut enough off of the spool. And I think you can use pretty much any wire. I've found that 36 gauge stranded works really well for me, because it doesn't take up a lot of space in the locomotive, under the shell once you're putting everything back together. I think that they're using something very close to 36 gauge stranded in the model itself from the factory too. So it might be 30 gauge, but in any case, this is 36 gauge stranded. I'm using 2 brown pieces because, like I was saying before, the polarity will not matter. If you were going to do this with multiple speakers where the polarity does matter, you would probably want to use some color coding so that you can remember which one is positive and which one is negative. I'm just going to dip the ends of these into the flux to make sure I have some flux on them, because flux is the magic that makes soldering work. And now that I have the flux on the wire, it should be as simple as getting just the tiniest amount of solder on the tip of the iron, which is now hot, and then just touch it. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the speaker by tinning the pads. There's just a tiny amount of solder on the tip of this, and you'll notice that I'm using a really tiny amount of solder because you don't want the contacts to bridge over to the metal on the speaker, because if they bridge, what will happen is you may get a short that would blow up the decoder. We don't want that. And I feel like I should have paid attention to what I was doing, because now I have to do this left-handed, but that's okay. I'm somewhat ambidextrous, so it shouldn't matter. And you'll know it's connected because you can give it a little tug and it'll just pull on the speaker. So as I was saying, I'm going to affix the speaker in the shell up here above where the gear tower is. And I'm going to do that off camera because it's a little bit fussy and I don't want to mess it up because I was trying to do it on camera. Just use whatever tools you need to get it in there properly. I think I can probably just do it with my fingers. You might want to use some needle nose pliers or something like that. So I'm going to tin the contacts on the motherboard. And this is one of these things where, you know, if you really wanted to, I suppose you could just use those clips if you have them, like what's on the rest of the model. I don't, because I think soldering gives it a better connection anyway. I'm just going to connect the wires now. And like I said before, it doesn't matter really which one goes where. All that matters is that you have a clean contact on it. What I need to do to test this is apply power to the track, which I'll do now. And what I'm trying to test right now is to see how good it sounds, for one thing. Meaning the quality of the sound, to make sure that the speaker installation is okay. It actually sounds really good. But I'm going to go to my Blunami app now. And the way this works is the Blunami decoder is sending a signal out over Bluetooth, which my phone is picking up. As you can see on the screen here, it's Blunami V1.0. And I push the button that says standard at the bottom left. And it'll collect the data from the decoder. And as soon as it gives you that little toot, that means that it's ready for action here. And what I want to do is test the horn to make sure it doesn't sound like it's rattling or anything like that. That's good. The bell sounds fine. Okay, the engine moves. This is all important stuff. Okay, so that means that all of the connections to the decoder are solid. The lights are working in both directions. I can see that. Probably can't see that from the angle we're at, but I'm looking off camera and I can see the lights coming on in both directions. And it sounds fine. So I'm going to take it off the track here in a second, but before I do, I'm going to go into the settings, which are a little gear icon down toward the bottom of the screen. And this is what's so cool about Blunami. You can change everything right on your phone. It is so easy. This alone should make Blunami a no-brainer for anybody, especially who's just getting started. I mean, it's easy to say, the decoder's more expensive or whatever. And that is true. The decoder is a little bit more expensive, but the ease with which you can program it may make that worthwhile. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change the Locomotive name. There's this little area up at the top that lets you name the locomotive. And I'm going to call this SW1500 WP 1501, because that's what it is. And then I'm going to change the DCC address. This doesn't really matter, but I'm going to do it anyway, to 1501. And that should be all I need to do for now. Let's see, down here in the decoder type, I think it already knows. So I don't think I need to change this now. I'm going to anyway. This is an EMD2. And that's all I want to change for now. I'm going to hit apply. And now those settings are saved in the decoder. So let me turn the power off. And I'm going to take this thing off the track now and do a couple more things with it before I close it up permanently. So what I'm talking about doing before I close this thing permanently is just making sure the wires are tucked up in there and that none of them are pinched on the side when I put the shell back on. And I need to mention this because it's a stupid mistake that I made. I stuck the speaker in here with that double-sided tape before going around the edges of the seam where the speaker meets the baffle with some RTV, that's a silicone sealant. That's something that I should have done, and if the sound had been not as good as it is, or if there were any kind of, rattling noises or anything like that, I would have had to remove the speaker very carefully and then put the RTV in there and then re-stick it in here. So I really lucked out that it sounds as good as it does. So at this point, I'm just going to put a piece of Kapton tape over the metal parts of the speaker so that there's no chance it'll short anything in here. I think there's very little chance anyway because the gear tower doesn't appear to be metal and there's no metal over here. And you can see that the speaker is situated over this part of the engine here. So I'm going to do it anyway just as a safeguard. It's an easy thing that I can do, and it's one of those things where if I didn't do it and then I had a short that destroyed the decoder, I'd be really mad at myself. This is Kapton tape. You've probably seen this stuff before. And in case you don't know, Kapton tape, spelled with a K, is an insulating tape. What it does, it's very thin, so it doesn't create any space issues generally. And what it does is it insulates metal pieces, right? So the metal on that speaker that you can see right in here, that metal, once I put the tape over it, won't touch any of the metal that's in here, like on the decoder, because this little thin piece of tape will be over it. And this is, again, one of these really inexpensive and easy to do things that could save you a lot of trouble later. So I always highly recommend, if you don't have Kapton tape, to have some handy, especially if you're going to do any of this kind of work. It's like having flux for your soldering. Have it, because it makes life much better. Okay, so Kapton tape is on the speaker now, and I'm just going to carefully position the shell over the chassis. Make sure that there are no wires being captured. There's none. Push this down, and then looks like the handrail is coming out. I'll fix that later, I guess. Still need to put it in the cradle to put the couplers back on. Still sounds good. I'm very happy with that. All right. Yep, sounds fine. So at this point, I'm going to go do some homework, check out the correct prime mover, for example. You can tell from the horn that it's the wrong horn, because this locomotive physically has a single chime horn right here. So it should sound more like a trumpet or something, or tuba. So that's wrong. And I suspect that the prime mover is probably also wrong. I think these have a 12-cylinder engine in them, and I don't know what's selected. I wasn't really paying attention to that. So I'm going to do some homework, get the settings I need, and then I'll come back and show you how we change the settings using the Blunami. Okay, so I ran into something that I wanted to show you that I thought is pretty cool. I've selected the Leslie A200 because I like the way it sounds, and I realized that they don't have the one that I really want, which was the RS25. And what I was noticing as I was doing this, which was something I didn't notice before, is if you look here next to the place where it says horn, there's a little horn icon, and you can test these as you're trying them. So that's the sample for the A200. There was a higher pitch one that was the A125, but I don't like that one as much, so I'm just going to use the, where did it go? The A200. I thought that sounds okay. A200. There we go. So just like we do on product spotlights here on the channel, I'll give this a little test run here in the studio. But in this case, because it's a how-to video, I'm also going to take it to a layout and we'll run it there. But let's just see how this performs here on the test track.
I also added momentum to the settings while I had it off camera.
Yeah, I'm liking the delay. Yeah, I ran a little too far back, but that's okay. It has a nice low speed control here. All right. Excellent. Let's go find a layout to run it on.
All right, so I've brought the Locomotive to my friend Seth Newman's house, and he has a layout that we've done a video of right here on the channel. You can see it. It's Union Pacific, Oakland Subdivision, 1999. If you'd like to take a look at it sometime, it's a great layout. And we're just going to pull this cut of cars around the layout a little bit. So as you can see, this type of installation is pretty simple to do. The main things to keep in mind are to take your time and be careful with the delicate stuff so you don't break anything. Other than that, the programming of the decoder is super simple using the Blunami app. I did a similar install on another HO scale model right here on this channel when the Blunami was first introduced, and another video series using a large scale Blunami in a garden scale Climax locomotive that uses battery power. You can find links to these programs in the description of this video if you'd like to see more. I think this type of decoder is the next leap forward in DCC. Having the ability to program the decoder right on your phone alone makes this technology worth investing in. To sweeten that deal, what about the instant feedback as you make on-the-fly changes right on the main track? It can't get any easier than that, especially if you're just getting started. Anyway, that's it for this show. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.